The indwelling divine. Autotheism-Advaita Vedanta, New Thought, I Am Activity, Sufism, Christian Mysticism, Eastern Mysticism. 4 traditions. United by a single world-changing recognition, the divine does not live above you, separate from you, judging you. The divine lives as you. You are not seeking God, you are God seeking itself. Autotheism-Advaita Vedanta, New Thought. I Am Activity, Sufism, Christian Mysticism, Eastern Mysticism. Personal Reading Series, April 2026. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 1.410, one of the 4 Mahavakyas. The kingdom of God is within you, Luke 17:21. The New Thought movement's founding scripture. I am that I am. Exodus 3:14. God's name revealed to Moses, the I Am Activity's central text. You are not in the universe is in you. Deepak Chopra, summarizing the Advaita Vedanta position. Table of Contents. Part 1. The thread that connects them. 1. The central teaching, you are the divine. 2. Why this idea is controversial and revolutionary. Part 2. The 4 traditions in depth. 3. Autotheism, the self as the divine. 4. Advaita Vedanta, the non-dual reality. 5. New Thought, the divinity of man. 6. The I Am Activity, God's name within you. 7. Sufism, the drop realizes it is the ocean. 8. Christian mysticism, the eye that sees God. 9. Eastern mysticism, Atman is Brahman across Asia. Part 3, Deep Dives. 7. The Mahavakyas, the 4 great sayings of the Upanishads. 8. Neville Goddard, New Thought's most radical voice. 9. The I Am Decrees, sacred affirmations in full. 10. The Law of Attraction, New Thought's popular legacy. Part 4, Comparison and Connection. 12. Side-by-side master comparison table. 13. The shared core, what all 7 agree on. 14. Where they differ, theology, practice, and style. Each tradition and the name of your path. Appendix. A. Key thinkers, texts, and resources. B. The Mahavakyas and key Sanskrit terms. See glossary. 1. The central teaching, you are the divine. These 4 traditions arrive from vastly different directions: ancient India, 19th century America, 1930s Chicago, and use different languages, rituals, texts, and communities. But they converge on a single recognition so radical that every mainstream religion has at some point tried to suppress it. The central teaching, the divine, is not separate from you. It is not above you, judging you, waiting for you to earn your way back. It is your own deepest nature. The boundary between you and God, between the individual and the infinite, between the self and the cosmos, is not real. It is a veil. The entire spiritual path in all 4 of these traditions is simply the process of waking up to what has always already been true. This is not selfishness. It is not arrogance. It is not the ego saying, I am better than others. It is the precise opposite. The recognition that what you are at your deepest level is the same thing that everything else is at its deepest level. When you honor yourself, you honor the universe that is expressing itself as you. When you harm yourself, you harm the universe in one of its expressions. Carl Sagan said it in scientific language, we are a way for the cosmos to know itself. The Upanishads said it in philosophical language, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. The I Am Activity says it in mystical language, your own I Am presence is God individualized. New Thought says it in practical language, recognize your divine nature and your life transforms. Different maps, the same territory. 2. Why this idea is controversial and revolutionary. Every major institutional religion in the Abrahamic tradition, Orthodox Christianity, Judaism, Islam, has at some point declared the teaching that I am God to be heresy, blasphemy, or worse. Christian mystic Meister Eckhart was put on trial for statements like, the eye through which I see God is the same eye through which God sees me. Al-Hallaj, the Sufi mystic, was executed in 922 CE for saying, An al-Haq, I am the truth God. In India, Advaita Vedanta has faced pushback from theistic schools who felt its Atman is Brahman teaching erased the personal God they loved. Why is this idea so threatening to institutional religion? Because it eliminates the need for an intermediary. If God lives within you, fully, completely, as your own nature, then you do not need a priest to access the divine. You do not need to purchase indulgences, perform elaborate rituals, or submit to institutional authority to reach what is already your own nature. The teaching is not just spiritually liberating. It is politically liberating. The most daring thing a person can do is to stand fully in their own being and say, "This is divine." Ernest Holmes paraphrased. 3. Autotheism. The self as the divine. Autotheism. Philosophical, theological position or global. I. What autotheism is and is not. The word autotheism sounds extreme. In a culture shaped by millennia of theology that insists on the absolute separation of the human and the divine, saying, "I am God," sounds like the height of arrogance. But autotheism, properly understood, is the precise opposite of arrogance. The autotheist is not saying, "My particular ego with all its preferences, opinions, and personality quirks is God." They are saying something far more radical and far more humble. The deepest layer of what I am, beneath the personality, beneath the ego, beneath even the sense of being a separate self, is the same infinite reality that underlies all of existence. This is not the inflation of the ego into God. It is the dissolution of the ego into the recognition that only God exists, and therefore what I truly am is God, not because I am special, but because everything is. Autotheism in the world's mystical traditions, Advaita Vedanta, Adi Shankaracharya. Brahman alone is real. The world is appearance. The individual self is identical with Brahman. Aham Brahmasmi, I am the divine reality. Sufism, Mansur al-Hallaj. An al-Haq, I am the truth. Al-Hallaj was executed for this statement. His followers understood him to mean not that his ego was God, but that the divine had so completely absorbed him that only God remained speaking. Christian Mysticism, Meister Eckhart. The eye through which I see God is the same eye through which God sees me. My eye and God's eye are one eye, one seeing, one knowing, one love. Eckhart was posthumously condemned for heresy. His teachings are now considered among the greatest in Christian mystical literature. Kabbalah, Isaac Luria. The divine sparks scattered through creation are your own deepest nature. Every human act of consciousness, love, and justice is God's own self-restoration. Gnosticism, various early Christian Gnostic teachers. The divine spark is trapped within the human body. Gnosis, direct knowledge of one's own divine nature, is salvation. You do not need an external savior because the divine is already within you. Taoism, Laozi, Zhuangzi, the Tao that runs through all things is the same Tao that you are. The sage who realizes their identity with the Tao has returned home, less explicit than Hindu autotheism but structurally identical. The 4 Mahavakyas, great sayings. In the Upanishadic tradition, 4 sentences, called Mahavakyas, the great sayings, express the autotheist realization most directly. They are considered the most concentrated philosophical and spiritual truth in human language. The indwelling divine, 7 paths to the God within. Prajnanam Brahma. Consciousness is Brahman, Aitareya Upanishad. The universal consciousness that pervades all things, that's Brahman, the divine. And consciousness is what you most essentially are. Your awareness is not something you have, it is the divine. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, the direct first-person statement. Not I am like God or I am of God. I am Brahman. The deepest I, the witness behind all experience, is identical with the ground of all existence. Tat Tvam Asi. Thou art that. Chandogya Upanishad, said by the teacher Uddalaka to his son Shvetaketu. That subtle essence which is the self of this whole world, that is the real. That is Atman. That art thou, Shvetaketu. You, reading this or that, I am Atma Brahma. This self is Brahman. Mandukya Upanishad. The most direct ontological statement. Not I am Brahman, not thou art that, but this self, the Atman, the witness consciousness, is Brahman. No intermediary, no metaphor, identity. Connection to the living way. Autotheism is the living way's philosophical heart. The teaching that the divine lives within you, that caring for yourself is an act of reverence, that the energy you run from heaven to earth passes through a body that is divine, is autotheism in practice. Holly Sarah Parsons wrote in Real Magic that all the support we need is within ourselves, and that we are always in charge. This is the practical autotheist position, not that we are better than others, but that the source lives within us, and we have access to it at all times. 4. Advaita Vedanta, the non-dual reality. Advaita Vedanta, Hindu philosophy or India or IDU 800 BCE present. The philosophy in full. Advaita Vedanta begins with a question that every human being eventually asks: what am I really? Not this body, it was born and will die. Not these thoughts, they come and go. Not these emotions, they rise and fall. What is the I that watches all of this? What is the witness? Advaita's answer, the witness, the pure awareness that observes all experience, is Atman. And Atman is not individual, not limited, not personal. It is Brahman, the infinite, eternal, ever-present awareness that is reality itself. There is no place where your awareness ends and God begins. They are the same awareness, looking through different eyes. The three core concepts: Brahman, ultimate reality. Brahman is the infinite, eternal, unchanging ground of all existence. It is not a God who created the world. It is the world in its deepest nature. Brahman has no qualities. It cannot be described because all description requires subject and object, and Brahman is prior to that division. It is sometimes called Sat Chit Ananda, being consciousness, bliss. But even these are pointers, not definitions. Atman, the individual self. Atman is the individual self, the witness consciousness within each being. Advaita teaches that Atman and Brahman are identical. The feeling of being a separate individual self, the sense that I am here, the world is out there, is a product of Maya. In reality, the Atman is unlimited. It is not inside the body as a soul in a container. It is the infinite awareness that the body appears within. Maya, the power of appearance. Maya is not illusion in the sense that the world doesn't exist. The world exists. Your experience is real. But you are misidentifying what you are. You think you are a body-mind system separate from God. This misidentification is Maya's primary effect. When the misidentification dissolves, when you directly see that what you are is Brahman, that is moksha, liberation. Not a place you go, a recognition of what always already was. The method, self-inquiry. Ramana Maharshi, the greatest modern Advaita teacher, distilled the entire path to a single practice, self-inquiry. The practice is devastatingly simple. Just ask, who am I? Not as a philosophical exercise, but as a direct investigation. When you ask, who am I? The mind turns back on itself, looking for the one who is asking. It finds, what? Look carefully. Keep looking. Ramana Maharshi, paraphrased from, who am I? Every answer the mind gives, I am a body, I am a personality, I am a name, is an object of awareness. But you are the awareness itself, not any object within it. Keep inquiring, keep dismissing any answer that is still an object, until what remains is the bare fact of awareness itself. That bare awareness is Atman, that is Brahman, that is what you are. Advaita and the 5 sheaths. The Taittiriya Upanishad describes the human being as 5 nested sheaths, like Russian dolls, each progressively subtler. Beyond all 5 sheaths is pure Atman, the witness that is aware of all 5, identified with none. The spiritual path is the progressive recognition that you are not any of the sheaths, but the unchanging awareness within which all 5 appear. Major Advaita teachers. Adi Shankaracharya, the philosopher who systematized Advaita Vedanta into its classical form, wrote commentaries on the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and Brahma Sutras. Founded 4 monastic orders across India that continue today. Considered one of the greatest philosophers in world history. Ramana Maharshi, the sage of Arunachala. Attained self-realization spontaneously at age 16 through a near-death experience in which he directly recognized his identity as the deathless Atman. Spent the rest of his life in silence and self-inquiry, teaching primarily through his presence and the practice of Who Am I? His 2 short books contain the essence of Advaita. Swami Vivekananda brought Advaita Vedanta to the Western world at the 1893 Parliament of World's Religions, taught a practical Vedanta, the divine within every human being as the basis for social service, equality, and the full dignity of every person. Each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divinity within. Nisargadatta Maharaj, a cigarette shop owner in Mumbai whose conversations were collected in I Am That, one of the most powerful Advaita texts of the 20th century. Direct, uncompromising, radical. You are not what you think you are. Find out what you are. That is all. Rupert Spira, contemporary British teacher of Advaita and Francis Lucille's lineage, makes the non-dual teaching accessible through careful, gentle dialogue. His books Being Aware and The Nature of Consciousness are among the clearest modern expressions of Advaita. Connection to the living way. Advaita Vedanta provides the living way with its deepest philosophical foundation. The teaching that there is no real separation between the self and the cosmos, that honoring yourself is honoring the whole, is Advaita Vedanta lived as a daily practice. Every time we run energy from heaven to earth and recognize ourselves as the meeting place of those two, we are embodying the Advaita insight. The 5 koshas also map perfectly onto the living way's energy-body practices. The pranamaya kosha is the layer we work with in pranayama and Reiki. The anandamaya kosha is what we touch in deep meditation. New Thought, American Spiritual Movement, 1840s present. The Origins, Phineas Quimby and Mental Healing. New Thought began with a clockmaker from Belfast, Maine named Phineas Quimby, who became fascinated with mesmerism and discovered he could heal people's illnesses through the power of the mind. Quimby's theory was radical for his time. Most illness, he concluded, originated not in the body but in false beliefs held in the mind. Correct the belief and the body heals. One of Quimby's patients was Mary Baker Eddy, who went on to found Christian Science, a related but distinct movement that emphasizes the unreality of matter and illness. Another was Warren Felt Evans, whose books began the spread of what would become New Thought. The movement crystallized through Emma Curtis Hopkins, known as the teacher of teachers, who trained virtually every major New Thought leader of the late 19th and early 20th century. Hopkins broke from Christian Science and developed a more universally spiritual, less dogmatic form of mind science teaching. The core New Thought theology. God is omnipresent. God is not up there. God is everywhere, in everything, as everything. There is no place God is not. This is not pantheism exactly, but functional panentheism. God permeates all of creation, including the human mind and body. The indwelling God. Within every human being is the direct presence of the divine, the indwelling God, the higher self, the Christ within, or simply the Spirit within. This is not a metaphor. New Thought teachers mean this literally. God is present within you as your deepest self. Thought creates reality. Because the divine mind is omnipresent and thought is the primary creative force, what you think consistently, you bring into manifestation. This is not the ego's will imposing itself on the universe. It is the divine intelligence within you, recognized and aligned with, expressing through you. The law of mind. Ernest Holmes called it the law of cause and effect. Operating in the mental realm, thought is cause, experience is effect. Change the thought, change the experience. This law of mind is impersonal. It responds to whatever you hold in consciousness with belief, regardless of whether it is consciously chosen or unconsciously held. Affirmative prayer. New Thought prayer is not petition. It does not ask God to do something as if God were withholding. It is affirmation, declaring the spiritual truth of a situation and recognizing that this truth is already established in divine mind. The practitioner does not beg for healing. They recognize that the divine wholeness is the underlying reality, and that recognition allows it to express physically. The major branches. Science of mind, religious science, the most philosophically sophisticated New Thought system. Holmes synthesized New Thought with Emerson, Hinduism, Buddhism, Christian mysticism, and emerging psychology. The Science of Mind is a comprehensive metaphysical textbook, now organized as centers for spiritual living worldwide. Unity Church, more explicitly Christian than other New Thought branches, teaches the metaphysical interpretation of the Bible, famous for the daily word, devotional and silent unity prayer ministry. 1. Of the most accessible and warm New Thought communities, divine science, perhaps the purest expression of the omnipresence doctrine. If God is omnipresent, there is literally nowhere that is not God. Disease, lack, and limitation are not real in the divine sense. They are the result of not recognizing what is already true. New Thought in the African American tradition New Thought found particular resonance in the African American community through figures like Father Divine, Johnny Coleman, and later through the influence of Oprah Winfrey, whose public spirituality draws heavily from New Thought streams. Key New Thought thinkers: Emma Curtis Hopkins, High Mysticism, the teacher of teachers, Train Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, Ernest Holmes, Nona Brooks, and many others. Her High Mysticism is considered the most spiritually advanced New Thought text, mystical, dense, and luminous. Ernest Holmes, The Science of Mind, the definitive New Thought philosopher. His Science of Mind synthesizes everything into a complete metaphysical system. His most famous quote, "Change your thinking, change your life." Florence Scovel Shinn, The Game of Life and How to Play It, practical, warm, and story-filled, made New Thought accessible to ordinary people through vivid examples of affirmation working in daily life, still widely read a century later. Neville Goddard, The Power of Awareness, Feeling is the Secret, the most radical New Thought voice, taught that imagination is God, that the human imagination is literally the divine creative faculty, and that assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled is how reality is shaped. His work is experiencing a massive contemporary revival online. Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life, brought New Thought to its largest modem audience. Combined affirmations with the belief that thought patterns create physical illness. Founded Hay House, now the world's largest self-help publisher. Cited extensively by Hallie Sarah Parsons in Real Magic. Connection to the Living Way. New Thought is the most direct philosophical ancestor of Real Magic by Hallie Sarah Parsons. Every author Hallie Sarah cites, Louise Hay, Wayne Dyer, Shakti Gawain, Doreen Virtue, is operating within the New Thought tradition or directly influenced by it. The core Real Magic teaching, that we create our reality through what we think, feel, speak, and do, is New Thought's law of mind expressed in Hallie Sarah's own voice and experience. The Living Way is a New Thought path, with Taoist roots, energy body practices, and earth stewardship added as living dimensions. 6. The I Am Activity, God's Name Within You. The I Am Activity. American Spiritual Movement, 1930s present. The central teaching, I Am Presence. The I Am Activity begins with a profoundly simple observation about the English language. The words, I am, are the name of God. In the book of Exodus, when Moses asks God's name, the answer is Ehya Asher Ehya, usually translated, I am that I am. God's name in this tradition is not Yahweh or Jehovah, but the pure verb of being itself, I am. The I Am Activity teaches that every human being has an I Am presence, a blazing column of divine light above them, connected to them by a silvery cord of light that is their individualized God self. This is not a metaphor. The I Am presence is understood as a literal being of pure divine energy, your higher self, the God that you are beyond the personality, beyond karma, beyond limitation. The I Am presence is God individualized, the God of you, by you, through you, as you. The I Am discourses, paraphrased. The power of I Am declarations. In the I Am activity, speech is understood as an act of divine creation. Every I Am statement is a decree, a command issued through the divine authority of your I Am presence. Whatever you attach to LM becomes what you are invoking and amplifying in your reality. The two-edged sword of I am positive, I am statements, I am light, I am abundance, I am health, I am peace, I am grateful, I am worthy, I am love. What to avoid? I am sick, I am broke, I am stupid, I am unlucky. In the 1 a.m. teaching, negative I am statements are understood as misuses of the divine name. You are declaring limitation as your reality with the full authority of your God self behind it. This is why Hallie Sarah Parsons' work on affirmations in Real Magic is so directly aligned. What you say, think, and do are 3 different things, and they need to be the same. The I Am activity says, begin with I am, the ascended masters. A distinctive element of the I Am activity is its teaching about ascended masters, beings who once lived in human form, completed their spiritual evolution, and ascended to a higher plane of existence from which they continue to guide humanity. Key ascended masters include Saint Germain and various other identities. The primary teacher of the I Am activity offers the gift of the violet flame, a spiritual fire of transmutation that dissolves karma. El Morya, master of the first ray, teaches divine will and leadership. Kuthumi, master of the second ray, teaches spiritual devotion. Jesus. In the I Am tradition, Jesus is honored as an ascended master who completed his evolution and ascended, not as a unique savior but as a way shower on the same path available to all. The violet flame, transmutation of karma. One of the I Am activity's most widely adopted practices is the violet flame, a spiritual fire associated with the seventh ray in Saint Germain, said to transmute negative karma, energetic blockages, and lower vibrations into higher frequencies. It is visualized as a blazing violet or purple flame surrounding and moving through the body. The practice, visualize the violet flame rising up from beneath you, surrounding you, and moving through every cell of your body, every thought in your mind, every atom in your energy field. Decree aloud, I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. The flame does not destroy, it transmutes. It turns lead into gold, karma into wisdom, fear into love. The violet flame decree, I am a being of violet fire. I am the purity God desires. Beloved, I am presence bright. Round me seal your tube of light from ascended master flame called forth now in God's own name. The I Am activity and its legal history. The I Am activity had a turbulent legal history that shaped American religious freedom law. After Guy Ballard's death in 1939, the movement was prosecuted by the U.S. government for mail fraud, the charge being that the Ballards could not have had the supernatural experiences they claimed. The Supreme Court's 1944 decision in United States v. Ballard ruled that courts cannot judge the truth or falsity of religious beliefs, only whether the believers sincerely hold them. This decision established a foundational protection for religious freedom in America and is still cited in religious liberty cases today. Connection to the living way, the I Am activity, gives the living way its most direct language for the affirmation practice. The understanding that I Am statements are sacred declarations of divine reality, that what you attach to I Am shapes your energetic field and your manifested experience, is directly applicable. The violet flame transmutation practice aligns perfectly with the living way's energy hygiene work, clearing stagnant or negative energy from the field using visualization and intention. And the I Am presence, the blazing column of divine light above and within you, is another name for exactly what Holly Sarah Parsons' heaven-to-earth energy running practice is working with. 7. The Mahavakyas, the four great sayings of the Upanishads. The four Mahavakyas deserve their own chapter because they are among the most concentrated and powerful philosophical statements in human history, and because they underlie not just Advaita Vedanta but autotheism in all its forms. Each comes from a different Veda, addressing the same truth from a different angle. Together, the four Mahavakyas address the teaching from every grammatical and philosophical angle: third person, first person, second person, demonstrative. The tradition holds that hearing and truly understanding even one Mahavakya from a qualified teacher is sufficient for liberation. The understanding is not intellectual. It is recognition, like suddenly seeing your own face in a mirror you had been looking through. 8. Neville Goddard, NewThought's most radical voice. Of all NewThought teachers, Neville Goddard pushed the teaching furthest and most uncompromisingly. A Barbadian-born lecturer in New York, Neville taught what he called the law and the promise, a system so radical that it makes most NewThought seem conservative by comparison. Imagination is God. Neville's central teaching, human imagination is not a tool that approaches God, it is God. The divine creative power of the universe is the imagination of the individual human being. When you imagine something with feeling and assume it as real, you are exercising the exact same creative faculty that brought the cosmos into existence. God is your own wonderful human imagination. That is the truth that will set you free. Neville Goddard, feeling is the secret. Feeling is the secret. Neville taught that imagination alone is insufficient. The key is imagining from the end state, with the feeling of the wish already fulfilled. Not, I want this, but the feeling of already having it, already being it. This feeling, held consistently, is the creative act. The outer world is compelled by law to rearrange itself to match the inner state. The I Am teaching in Neville. Neville was deeply influenced by the I Am tradition and by William Blake's mystical poetry. His teaching on I Am aligns directly. I Am is the name of God, your own being. Whatever you affirm after I Am with feeling becomes your declaration of divine creative intent. The entire universe conspires to make it so. not because you have convinced an external God to help you, but because your I am is the creative power of God itself. You are already that which you want to be, and your refusal to believe it is the only reason you do not see it. 9. The I am decrees, sacred affirmations in full. I am decrees are the primary practice of the I am activity, spoken affirmations using the sacred I am formula, stated with conviction, feeling, and authority. Unlike passive affirmations, decrees are understood as commands issued through the divine authority of the I am presence. They are meant to be spoken aloud, with full voice, with the energy and conviction of divine certainty. How to work with decrees. Stand or sit upright. Embody the I am presence through your posture. Take 3 full breaths and align with your I am presence above you. Visualize the column of blazing white or golden light descending into you. Speak the decree aloud with full conviction, not tentatively, as divine authority expressing through you. Feel the words as true now, not as a hope for the future. After the decree, sit in silence and receive. Core I am decrees. I am light. I am the light of God. I am illumined. I am clear. I am free. I am abundance. I am the abundance of God made visible. I am the infinite supply of the universe expressing through me now. I am health. I am the perfect health of God manifest in this body. Every cell is filled with divine light, wholeness, and vitality. I am peace. I am the peace that passes understanding. I am calm, centered, and at rest in the presence of the I am. I am love. I am love. I am loved. I am loving. Divine love flows through me and from me in all directions. The tube of light. Beloved, I am presence bright. Round me seal your tube of light from ascended master flame called forth now in God's own name. Let it keep my temple free from all discord sent to me. I am calling forth violet fire to blaze and transmute all desire, keeping on in freedom's name until I am one holy flame. 10. The law of attraction, NewThought's popular legacy. The law of attraction, the idea that like attracts like, that your predominant mental and emotional state draws corresponding experiences into your life, is NewThought's most famous export to popular culture. Rhonda Byrne's The Secret brought it to 30 million readers. Esther Hicks's Abraham teachings built a massive following. But the concept is at least 150 years old, and its roots go deeper than most people realize. The lineage of law of attraction. Step 1. Phineas Quimby. Mental healing. False beliefs create illness. Correct thought heals. Step 2. Emma Curtis Hopkins. Omnipresent God, divine mind responds to aligned consciousness. Step 3. William Walker Atkinson. Published Thought Vibration, or the Law of Attraction in the Thought World. The first use of the phrase law of attraction in print. Step 4. Napoleon Hill. Think and Grow Rich. Brought the mental science of success to mass culture. Step 5. Neville Goddard. Imagination is God, feeling is the secret. Assume the wish fulfilled. Step 6. Louise Hay. You can heal your life. Thought patterns create physical reality, affirmations as healing tools. Cited in Real Magic. Step 7. Esther Hicks Abraham. Channeled teachings on vibrational alignment, emotional guidance system, deliberate creation. Step 8. Rhonda Byrne, The Secret. Brought law of attraction to mainstream global culture through book, DVD, and viral distribution. The popular law of attraction often loses the theological depth of its New Thought origins, stripping out the indwelling God, the divine omnipresence, and the ethical framework to focus on material manifestation. New Thought teachers like Ernest Holmes would have been troubled by a version of the teaching that is only about getting things. The original teaching was about recognizing your divine nature. Manifestation was a consequence, not the goal. 7. Sufism. The drop realizes it is the ocean. Sufism, India. The drop in the ocean. Sufism's central metaphor. Sufism's most beloved teaching comes in the form of a metaphor so simple and so profound that it has been used by Sufi teachers for over 1,000 years. The individual soul is like a drop of water that falls from the sky into the ocean. The drop is real. The ocean is real. The drop comes from the ocean, is made of the same water as the ocean, and returns to the ocean. But for the brief moment it is a drop, it experiences itself as separate. The Sufi spiritual path is not about the drop becoming better or more righteous. It is about the drop recognizing that it was never truly separate from the ocean, that the separation was only apparent, created by the drop's sense of itself as a distinct bounded thing. When the drop dissolves back into the ocean, nothing is lost, the water is still there. only the boundary dissolves. This is fana, the annihilation of the separating ego, not of the soul itself. I looked in temples, churches, and mosques, but I found the divine within my heart. Fana and baka, annihilation and subsistence. These two concepts form the heart of advanced Sufi practice. Fana, the annihilation or dissolution of the ego self in the divine presence. This is not physical death, but the death of the illusion of separation. The veil between the drop and the ocean dissolves. The mystic al-Hallaj expressed this when he said, An al-Haq. He was not claiming his ego was divine, but that the ego had dissolved, and only God remained speaking through that form. He was executed for this statement in 922 CE. Baka, the state that follows fana, living in the world after the ego has dissolved. The mystic returns to ordinary life, but now as a clear mirror of the divine, without the distorting veil of self-centered ego. Baka is sometimes called subsistence in God. The saint continues to exist, but their existence is now filled with and oriented toward the divine. Wadat al-Wujud. The most philosophically radical Sufi teaching, there is only one being, and that being is God. All of existence is a self-manifestation of the divine. The world is not separate from God, it is God appearing in multiplicity. Ibn Arabi developed this into a complete metaphysical system that has profoundly influenced Islamic, Jewish, and Christian mysticism. The great Sufi voices. Rabia al-Adawiyya, a freed slave from Basra who became one of Islam's greatest mystics and the first to fully articulate the concept of divine love as the heart of the Sufi path. She taught that God should be loved for God's own sake, not for paradise and not from fear of hell. Her famous prayer, O God, if I worship you for fear of hell, bum me in hell. If I worship you in hope of paradise, exclude me from paradise. But if I worship you for your own sake, withhold not your everlasting beauty. Al-Hallaj, Persian mystic executed for the statement, an al-Haq. His execution became a defining moment in Sufi history. He reportedly went to his death in a state of ecstasy, saying that to die in love of God was the highest honor. His legacy, the teaching that the mystic who has achieved fana cannot but speak as God, because the ego that was separate from God has dissolved. His poems and teaching influenced every major Sufi after him. Al-Ghazali, Persian theologian, philosopher, and mystic, perhaps the greatest single figure in Islamic intellectual history. His Ihya Ulum al-Din reconciled Sufi mysticism with orthodox Islamic theology, making Sufism acceptable to mainstream Islam. He legitimized the inner experiential dimension of Islam for mainstream Muslims. Without him, Sufism might have remained a persecuted minority tradition. Ibn Arabi, born in Andalusia, died in Damascus, called the greatest master. His Fusus al-Hikam and al-Futuhat al-Makkiyah constitute the most comprehensive mystical philosophy in Islamic history. His doctrine of Wadat al-Wujud, that only God exists and the world is God's self-manifestation, is the Islamic equivalent of Advaita Vedanta's Brahman-only teaching. He deeply influenced Rumi, Meister Eckhart, and Jewish Kabbalah. Rumi, Bomb in Bulk, died in Konya, the most widely read poet in the world today. His Masnavi, 25,000 verses of mystical poetry, has been called the Persian Quran. His central image, the reed flute, cut from the reed bed, crying for reunion with its source. Every soul is the reed, separated from the divine origin, crying in its longing to return. His poetry is the most accessible and emotionally powerful expression of Sufi longing in any language. Hafiz, Persian lyric poet from Shiraz. His Divan is the most beloved book in the Persian-speaking world, consulted for guidance like an oracle. Where Rumi is oceanic, Hafiz is intimate. His poems speak directly to the divine as a beloved, using the language of wine, taverns, and love as metaphors for mystical intoxication and union. His famous line, "Even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, 'You owe me.' Look what happens with a love like that. It lights the whole sky." Sufi practices. Dhikr, the central Sufi practice, repetitive recitation of God's names or short phrases. Allah, La ilaha illa Allah, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim, in rhythmic, often accompanied by breath control, until the conscious mind quiets and the remembrance fills the whole being. Equivalent to mantra practice in Hinduism, Sama, the listening to sacred music as a vehicle for spiritual states. The Mevlevi order uses music, poetry, and the Sema dance to induce states of fana. The whirling represents the soul revolving around the divine center as planets around the sun. Murakaba, Sufi meditation. Silent, concentrated attention on the divine presence or on the heart center. Some orders practice visualization of light in the heart, similar in form to Vipassana meditation but with devotional content. Tawakkul, complete trust in and surrender God's will, not passive resignation but active, loving release of the ego's need to control outcomes. The practical dimension of fana in daily life. Sobet, transmission through presence and conversation with a master. Sufism emphasizes that awakening is transmitted person to person, not only through texts. The sheikh's state of presence communicates directly to the student's heart. Connection to the living way. Sufism enriches the living way in several direct ways. The dhikr practice, repetitive sacred sound and name, is the Islamic parallel to mantra and to the living way's sound healing practices. Rumi's poetry of longing for the divine source is the emotional language of what the living way practices when running the heaven-earth current. The drop and ocean metaphor is perhaps the most beautiful single image for the teaching that the individual is already part of the divine, not seeking to become it, but to recognize it. 8. Christian mysticism, the eye that sees God. Mystical Christianity. Europe, Global Eye, 4th century present. Meister Eckhart, Sermon 57. Christian mysticism. Meister Eckhart, the eye that sees God. Johannes Eckhart, known as Meister Eckhart, was a German Dominican theologian and mystic whose sermons pushed Christian theology to its absolute limit, and, many would argue, beyond it. His statements sound less like Christianity and more like Advaita Vedanta. He was posthumously condemned for heresy. His teaching is now recognized as one of the greatest in Christian mystical literature. The eye through which I see God is the same eye through which God sees me. My eye and God's eye are one eye, one seeing, one knowing, one love. We are all meant to be mothers of God. What good is it to me if this eternal birth of the divine Son takes place unceasingly but does not take place within myself? Meister Eckhart. If I am to know God directly, I must become completely God, and God must become completely I. Meister Eckhart. Eckhart's most radical concept is the Godhead, the divine ground beyond even the Trinity, beyond all concepts, beyond being itself. The soul's deepest ground is identical with this Godhead. When the soul is stripped of all images, concepts, and attachments and returns to its ground, it finds itself in the Godhead. This is indistinguishable from Advaita Vedanta's Atman Brahman identity, or the Sufi concept of fana. Other great Christian mystics, the Desert Fathers and Mothers, the first Christian contemplatives, hermits in the desert of Egypt who developed the practice of hesychasm, apophatic prayer, and the Jesus prayer. Their sayings are the foundation of Christian contemplation. Hildegard of Bingen, visionary whose Civias described extraordinary encounters with the divine light, composed extraordinary music she described as the sounds she heard in her visions. Also a pioneering healer and naturalist, her Physica describes medicinal plants with a sophistication unusual for her era. A patron saint of those who find the sacred in nature and in creativity. Julian of Norwich received 16 showings during a near-death illness. Her Revelations of Divine Love is the first book in English known to be written by a woman. Her central message: all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. She described God as mother, as naturally as father, radical for her era. John of the Cross, author of The Dark Night of the Soul, the definitive account of the spiritual purification that precedes mystical union. The dark night is not depression, but the divine stripping away of all consolations, props, and attachments, until only pure faith and love remain. His poetry is among the greatest in the Spanish language. Teresa of Avila, her interior castle maps the soul's journey through 7 mansions, toward the innermost chamber where union with God occurs. Practical, earthy, and deeply human alongside her mysticism, she famously said, God is also found among the pots and pans. Thomas Merton brought Christian mysticism into dialogue with Zen Buddhism, Sufism, Hinduism, and the civil rights movement. His contemplative prayer and new seeds of contemplation are essential modern texts. He saw the same truth in all contemplative traditions. Teilhard de Chardin, developed a theology in which the entire universe is evolving toward the omega point, a final union of all consciousness in the divine. The divine milieu teaches that matter itself is sacred. Everything and every action can be offered to God. A Christian pantheist in practice, if not in name. Apophatic theology, God beyond all names. One of Christian mysticism's greatest contributions is the apophatic tradition, the teaching that God cannot be adequately described by any positive concept. Every name we give God, good, powerful, loving, infinite, is still a concept, and God is beyond all concepts. The Via Negativa says, we can only say what God is not limited, not a thing among things, not an object of knowledge. This leads paradoxically to the most intimate encounter. When all concepts are stripped away, what remains is direct experience without any mediating idea. This is Meister Eckhart's Godhead, Advaita's Nirguna Brahman, and the Tao that cannot be spoken, different traditions pointing to the same wordless reality. To know God, let go of every image of God. Meister Eckhart, Christian Mysticism and the Indwelling Divine. The Christian mystical tradition's contribution to the indwelling divine teaching runs through several key concepts. Theosis deification, the Eastern Orthodox teaching that the goal of Christian life is theosis, becoming divine by participation. God became human so that humans might become God. Not metaphorically divine, but actually partaking in the divine nature. The human being is destined for deification. The indwelling spirit, your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. The divine literally dwells within the body of the believer. The Christian mystics took this literally and explored it deeply. The spirit within is not a guest, but the home of the soul. The kingdom within, the kingdom of God, is within you. NewThought took this scripture as its founding charter. Christian mysticism says the same. The kingdom is not elsewhere or future. It is the interior reality accessible in contemplative stillness now. The Christ within, Paul's Christ in me, the hope of glory. Christian mystics understood this not as the historical Jesus dwelling within as a distinct person, but as the divine nature that is the true identity of every soul. Connection to the living way. Christian mysticism is one of the living way's most direct spiritual ancestors through the teachers Holly Sarah Parsons has cited and absorbed. Louise Hay, Wayne Dyer, and Doreen Virtue all work within traditions deeply shaped by Christian mysticism's teaching that the divine dwells within every person. Meister Eckhart's "The eye through which I see God is the same eye through which God sees me" is the single most elegant statement of what the living way practices when it teaches that caring for the self is honoring the divine. Julian of Norwich's "All Shall Be Well" is the contemplative basis for the trust and surrender that Holly Sarah describes in Real Magic. 9. Eastern mysticism. Atman is Brahman across Asia. Eastern mysticism. Hindu, Buddhist, and Taoist mystical traditions or Asia. Hindu mysticism beyond Advaita, Kashmir Shaivism. While Advaita Vedanta is the most famous Hindu non-dual philosophy, Kashmir Shaivism is its most radically affirmative counterpart. Where Advaita sometimes describes the world as Maya to be transcended, Kashmir Shaivism says the world is the joyful, pulsing self-expression of divine consciousness in its creative play. Abhinavagupta, Kashmir Shaivism's greatest thinker, taught that everything, including what appears dark, difficult, or unspiritual, is the divine consciousness expressing itself in one of its infinite forms. Liberation is not escaping the world but recognizing the divine within it completely. This makes Kashmir Shaivism one of the most world-affirming non-dual philosophies in existence, and one of the most directly applicable to a path like the living way. I bow to the self, that pure consciousness which, in the play of its own freedom, appears as the multitude of living beings, Buddhist mysticism, Buddha nature, and sunyata. Buddhism's relationship to the indwelling divine is more complex than Hinduism's. The Buddha explicitly rejected the concept of a permanent self, which might seem to rule out any teaching about the divine within the self. But Mahayana Buddhism developed concepts that functionally parallel the Hindu Atman Brahman identity, approached from a different direction. Tathagatagarbha, the teaching prominent in the Tathagatagarbha Sutras and the Nirvana Sutra, that every sentient being possesses Buddha nature, an inherent seed of awakening that is their deepest reality. You are not trying to become a Buddha, you already are one, covered by obscurations. The path is uncovering what was always already there. This is structurally identical to Advaita's Atman Brahman teaching and the Christian mystical indwelling divine. Sunyata, the Madhyamaka teaching of Nagarjuna, that all phenomena are empty of inherent, independent existence. Nothing exists in isolation. Everything arises in interdependence. This emptiness is not nihilism, but the recognition that what we take to be fixed, separate things are actually fluid, interconnected processes. The self that seems separate from the divine is empty of the separation we imagine. Zen mind beginner's mind, Chan. Zen Buddhism approaches the non-dual recognition through direct, sudden insight rather than philosophical analysis. The koan practice, what was your original face before your parents were born, is designed to break the ordinary mind's categories and allow direct recognition of what Zen calls your original nature. This original nature is Buddha nature, and it is always already present. Dzogchen, the highest teaching of the Nyingma school of Tibetan Buddhism. Dzogchen teaches that the nature of mind is primordially pure, spontaneously perfect, and identical with the Dharmakaya. You are not progressing toward enlightenment, you are resting in what you already are. Recognition of this is itself liberation. Taoist mysticism, returning to the source. Taoism's mystical current is less concerned with the question, what am I, than with the question, what is the nature of reality, and how do I align with it? But its answer contains the same non-dual recognition. The Tao that runs through all things is also the Tao that you are. The separation between self and cosmos is functional, not fundamental. The Taoist sage is not someone who has achieved something extraordinary, they are someone who has stopped doing something unnecessary, the constant effort to be different from what they are. When that effort relaxes, what remains is the Tao expressing naturally through a human form. This is Wu Wei, not the absence of action, but the absence of the effortful separation between the actor and the action, between the self and the world. Knowing others is wisdom. Knowing yourself is enlightenment. Mastering others requires strength. Mastering yourself requires true power. Laozi Tao Te Ching, Chapter 33. The Convergence, what all Eastern mysticism shares. When we look across Hindu mysticism, Buddhist mysticism, and Taoist mysticism, a remarkable convergence appears. The separate self is not ultimately real. The boundaries of the individual are functional but not metaphysically fundamental. What you truly are is inseparable from what the universe truly is, whether this is described as identity, emptiness, Buddha nature, or Tao. The recognition is structurally the same. The path is recognition, not achievement. You are not trying to become something you are not. You are uncovering what you have always been. Direct experience is the authority, not scripture or doctrine. The teacher points, the student must see for themselves. Liberation is available in this body, in this lifetime, possibly in this moment. Connection to the living way, Eastern mysticism as a whole, gives the living way its deepest ontological foundation. The 5 kosha model maps the energy-body practices. The Buddha nature teaching supports the understanding that every person already carries the seed of awakening. No one needs to be fixed. Dzogchen's teaching that liberation is recognizing what already is rather than achieving something new is the philosophical basis for the living way's gentle, non-striving approach to spiritual practice. And Taoism's Wu Wei, acting from natural alignment rather than effortful will, is the mode of the living way's daily life practice. 12. Side-by-side master comparison table. The shared core, what all 7 agree on. Despite their different origins, languages, and methods, all 7 traditions are saying the same thing in different dialects. The divine is not separate from the human, whether called Brahman, the indwelling God, the I Am Presence, or simply the deepest self. The sacred lives within you as you at all times. Separation from God is not a fact. It is a belief, a misidentification, a veil. The spiritual path is AV, the recognition of what was always already true. Caring for the self is honoring the divine, not because the ego is God, but because the divine expresses as you, and your flourishing is the divine's flourishing through one of its forms. Words and thoughts have creative power, whether framed as Maya, the law of mind, or the I am decree. What you consistently hold in consciousness shapes your reality. Liberation, transformation, and healing are available now, not after death, not in a future life, not after sufficient suffering. The recognition of your divine nature is available in this breath. No intermediary required. The divine within you is accessible directly, without a priest, without a temple, without purchasing anything. Teachers are valuable, they are not gatekeepers. Where they differ: theology, practice, and style. Personal versus impersonal divine. Advaita Vedanta leans toward an impersonal Brahman beyond personality, beyond even love in the human sense. The I am activity is highly personal. The ascended masters are distinct beings who love you and guide you. New Thought sits in between. God is mind, but also a presence that responds to prayer. The role of thinking. Advaita is suspicious of thought. The mind is part of Maya. Liberation goes beyond thought to pure awareness. New Thought and the I am activity both use thought as the primary tool of practice. Thought, aligned with divine truth, is the healing force. Instantaneous versus gradual. Advaita describes sudden recognition as possible, though years of preparation typically precede it. New Thought and I am activity both offer practices that can show results quickly. Autotheism, as a position, is instantaneously true. The work is in recognizing it, which may take time. The indwelling divine 7 paths to the God within. The world, real or illusion. Advaita Vedanta calls the phenomenal world Maya appearance, not ultimate reality. New Thought is more world-affirming. The world is real, and we can transform our experience of it through aligned consciousness. The I am activity is world-engaged. Ascended masters work in the world to raise its vibration. Community and organization. Advaita Vedanta has traditional monastic lineages, but also operates through informal teacher-student relationships. New Thought has organized churches. The I am activity has a structured organization. Autotheism is not organized at all. It is a position, not a community. Each tradition and the name of your path. All 4 traditions offer something to the name Search for the Living Way. Here is an honest assessment of what each contributes. Autotheism. The philosophical truth is exactly right, but the word sounds clinical and self-congratulatory to uninitiated ears. Autotheic as an adjective describing the practice works better than as a religion name. Advaita Vedanta. Beautiful and profound, but very specifically Hindu. Using it without the full Hindu context would feel borrowed rather than originated. Better honored as an influence than adopted as a name. New Thought. New Thought is already a named movement with organizations attached, but the spirit of New Thought, fresh seeing. Awakened consciousness, thinking beyond limitation, is very much the living way's spirit. I am activity. The I am framing is powerful and biblical rooted. I am as the name of the divine within is exactly the teaching. A path called the I am way, or Vivam, could work. Sufism, Wahidism, the emotional language of Sufism, longing, love, the cry of the reed, is beautiful inspiration. But adopting Sufi terminology without the Islamic context risks cultural appropriation. Better to honor Sufism as an emotional and poetic inspiration than to borrow its specific vocabulary. Christian mysticism. Meister Eckhart's language is the most universally accessible of all the traditions. The eye through which I see God is the same eye through which God sees me, requires no cultural translation. A path named something that carries this quality of mutual beholding could work beautifully. Eastern mysticism, Svabhavam, Dzogchen's recognition of what already is, and Kashmir Shaivism's everything is the divine in its play, are perhaps the most world-affirming frameworks in all of Eastern mysticism, and the closest to the living way's joyful, earth-honoring, body-positive approach. Synthesis possibility, a name that carries Advaita's non-dual recognition, New Thought's practical orientation, and the I am's embodied divine presence, without being owned by any one tradition. The word Illuminism sidesteps the lunatic confusion of luminism while preserving the light theme. A. Key thinkers, texts, and resources. Autotheism and non-dual mysticism. Meister Eckhart. The complete mystical works of Meister Eckhart. Trans. Maurice Oakwalshi. Crossroad Publishing. Halaj. The Tawasin. Trans. Aisha Abd ar-Rahman. Diwan Press, 1974. Rupert Spira. Being Aware of Being Aware. Sahaja Publications, 2017. Rupert Spira. The Nature of Consciousness. Sahaja Publications. Advaita Vedanta. Ramana Maharshi. Who Am I? Sri Ramanasramam, 1923. Free online. Nisargadatta Maharaj, I Am That. Trans. Maurice Friedman, Acorn Press, 1973. Adi Shankaracharya. Vivekachudamani. Various translations. The Upanishads. Trans. Eknath Iswaran. Nilgiri Press, 2007. New Thought. Ernest Holmes, The Science of Mind. Tarcher Penguin, 1926, 2010. Louise Hay. You Can Heal Your Life. Hay House, 1984. Neville Goddard, The Power of Awareness. Divorce and Company, 1952. Free online. Neville Goddard, Feeling is the Secret. Merchant Books, 1944. Free online. Florence Scovel Shinn, The Game of Life and How to Play It. Self-published, 1925. Free online. Emma Curtis Hopkins, High Mysticism. 1920. Free online. The I Am Activity. Guy Ballard, Unveiled Mysteries. St. Germain Press, 1934. The I Am Discourses. St. Germain Press, multiple volumes. Elizabeth Clare Prophet, The Lost Teachings of Jesus. Summit University Press, 1988. The Indwelling Divine, 7 Paths to the God Within. B. The Mahavakyas and Key Sanskrit Terms. C. Glossary. Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahman, I am the divine, I am that. Not as a claim of the ego, as the recognition of what you have always been,